So Death to the Daleks is a bit of a notorious serial, as far as I can ascertain. Admittedly, I've had trouble gauging the wider audience opinion of it, which could just speak to how nothing it is. We have the return of the Daleks again, with Nation writing for them, but this time he seems to have had some new ideas after Planetary Use Festival. But is it bad, is it good, or is it just nothing too special? Let's find out. The serial begins somewhat strongly, as we get the TARDIS being forced to land due to a power drain, which sets up the initial mystery. From there, the first episode spends time slowly giving us new elements, as we meet a military force from Earth who are searching for a mineral to stop a plague, as well as meeting the Exelons, the natives of the planet. But by this point in their evolution, they're simple hunters. Then we get the introduction of the Daleks, which like with all Dalek serials, happens at the end of the episode, as if it's a big surprise. The next few episodes follow the Daleks pretending to work with the humans, before betraying them, the internal politics of a human crew, with one taking command against the previous commander's orders, and the exploration of the now dying Exelon race. So let's begin by talking about the power drain and the Exelons first, as they're the more interesting aspect. The serial tells us that the Exelons were a race which was so advanced that they travelled the stars and even visited Earth, which is to explain the pyramids and other creations. Due to their race being so advanced, they created a city that was also a computer, which was uniquely organic, which grew in power and eventually threw away its creators when they tried to destroy it. The computer now is destroying the planet as it survives by draining power from the atmosphere, which is what has drained all the ships. This has caused the Exelons to devolve, with most shifting to a ritualistic society, while a few still do hold on to their past and are rebels. Now this is an interesting idea, which the show hasn't explored before, but sadly it's not well executed here, due to the story having other elements at play. The Exelons are interesting, but in some ways underdeveloped, although we see enough from them to understand their current state. It is somewhat unfortunate that the serial isn't about them though. As for the computer itself, that is very interesting, with the idea being quite well executed, but lacking somewhat. The city isn't explored in terms of its intelligence and what knowledge it holds, and instead purely for its defences. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it ends up feeling like it's lacking something. The puzzles that the Doctor and Bilal have to go through range from quite simplistic to very out there in terms of their complexity. The first is a puzzle where someone has to find the correct shape out of a series which will open the main door. The next is a maze which has the route marked out. Then a game of hopscotch to avoid the dangerous panels. Then there's a room which causes people to try and kill one another. And the final puzzle is an attack on their sanity. So we go from simple puzzles to mental battles, which is quite the leap, ironically done through the hopscotch. I do have to note though that the visuals of the final room feel very seizure inducing. I don't suffer from seizures, but even I had trouble watching it the last time. And so for anyone who does suffer from epilepsy or something, I'm surprised they'd be able to get through it. And while it could just be my opinion, I'm kind of surprised there isn't a seizure warning with this episode now, especially with them all on iPlayer. The challenges prove easy for the Doctor and the Daleks, but seemingly deadly for the Exelons who have tried, as none have made it far, with basically none passing the first room. One thing though is that the hopscotch doesn't actually give any information as to what to do, unlike the previous two, and so it does make you wonder how someone without a sonic screwdriver got past. The city can also form antibodies which are human-sized to take on any threat which attacks its circuitry, which does give us something cool at the end. The journey into the control room is fun to watch, although I am curious how the Daleks did the maze. The Doctor ultimately destroys the city and sees it as a tragedy, as he thought it was one of the 700 wonders of the universe. On the characters, we have a few humans, who make up the majority of the cast, alongside one Exelon, Bilal. We'll begin with Bilal, who isn't especially interesting, but a welcome presence. He doesn't appear until halfway through the serial, and spends almost the entire rest of it with the Doctor, sort of taking over the assistant role from Sarah, for the section in the city. He is the one to tell the Doctor of their planet's history, plus saves both of them during their escape from the Daleks in the tunnels. What he brings to this serial the most is a sense of charm, as when he's on screen he has a naivety about the situation that is charming. I think the general presence that the character has, which was given to him by the actor, is the only thing that makes him in any way memorable, as I don't think the lines he's given are especially noteworthy. The humans aren't the most interesting the show's given us so far, with them all being a bit basic. Most of them die pretty quickly, with the only ones who have any longevity being Galloway, Hamilton and Tarrant. There are also two others, including the Commander, but both are killed pretty quickly, to allow a power vacuum for Galloway, which goes nowhere. There isn't really anything to say about these characters as individuals, with the exception of Galloway, who is actually somewhat interesting. Galloway was the third in command of the Earth mission, and when the commander died, he took command, against his orders. During this time he assisted the Daleks, but by the end he had seen their evil ways and sacrificed himself to kill them. So it's not the most amazing arc, and it doesn't really work as a redemption story either, for not following his commander's orders, and allowing Hamilton to take command. But by this point of the story, the Daleks are taking control of the planet, and so it doesn't really matter who is in command. His sacrifice is alright, but it doesn't feel like a redemption due to the underwhelming setup and execution of it. Sadly, there isn't really anything else to say about the others. Hamilton is just sort of there, while Tarrant is basically just a girl of the group, who really only does one thing, which is with Sarah, and it's off screen. That's it for the humans, and so now for the Daleks, who vary in this serial between being somewhat strong and just fine. To explain why the Daleks are on this planet, they are searching for the same mineral as the humans, apparently because they are affected by the same plague, but in fact are the ones to have caused it, and want to have a supply of the mineral so they can force the space powers to concede. This is a cool enough idea to explain their presence, and then forcing them to work with the humans due to the power drain does give us some good Dalek moments of them having to hold back. Although of course that was far better done in Power of the Daleks. Ironically, a serial that was criticised by Nation for the Daleks being too nice. But when you have no ideas of your own, why not steal better ones? There are some interesting, we'll call it, additions to the Dalek lore, notably with the introduction of the idea that they don't need power to move, and instead move through psychokinetic power. This is obviously to make the Daleks work in a serial where they should be powerless, and it's a really stupid idea. We also get to see their intelligence, as they are able to make new bullet-based weapons without any power, which raises some questions. Plus that they keep small models of the TARDIS lying around, for some reason. Or did they build one with the guns just to shoot it? But on the other hand, we have a Dalek who loses 2 prisoners and so kills itself by spinning around in circles. Very intimidating. Not to mention their constant deaths to one of the city's routes. This really isn't their best outing, and the only reason they're here is because Barry Letts wanted them back again. One thing I do like about these Daleks is their unique colour scheme, as they are painted silver with black hemispheres, which is only used in this serial. This was to try and recapture the original Dalek look from the black and white era, and it's a real shame it never appeared again, as it's a great change up from the grey and black we'll see for the remainder of the show. On Sarah, she's quite pitifully used. In fact, I can't really think of anything that she does of note, bar one thing off screen, which is when she and Tarrant switch the mineral bags for bags of dirt. That's literally it for her, as she spends the first stretch as a prisoner of the Exelons until the Doctor arrives and they escape. This use of her, alongside the use of Jo last season, has made me realise something, and that's that Nation doesn't write female characters well, even the pre-established ones. Back during the Hartnell era, I thought he did very well with Barbara, but based on his more recent work, either he has lost his edge or it was just Whittaker and Spooner picking up where he lacked. Even his own female characters, even back then, weren't the best written, with the exception of Sarah Kingdom, but she was only his for 3 episodes, and one was a comedy. This feels like a massive realisation to me, and it will definitely have an impact on how I view his next serials. So finally the Doctor, who Nation does know how to write, with him giving a good showing for this incarnation, which does make for a good change up as to how Nation wrote him previously. We have fight scenes, mental attacks, and even some technical stuff at the end, meaning we see basically all sides of him. It's a fine showing for him without there being anything new to his character. His scenes with Bilal are great, due to their chemistry, but he doesn't really have a strong bond with any other characters, with even his dynamic with Sarah lacking after episode 1. On the behind the scenes, there are only 2 things I want to talk about. The first of which is the Daleks' new guns, or rather one of the props, specifically the handheld version which is carried by Bilal. The reason that this prop is notable is that it would later go on to be nearly used in the first Star Wars film, but instead was replaced by a smaller new prop that carried over several design elements. Finally, we have some behind the scenes developments for the show, as this serial was kind of the beginning of the end for the Pertwee era, as it was during the production of this serial that both Barry Letts and Terrance Dicks decided to take their leave at the end of the season. At the same time, Pertwee had been struggling due to Roger Delgado's death, Katie Manning's departure, and the lessening of the unit regulars, alongside his chronic back pain, causing him to consider quitting. He did speak to the head of drama, Sean Sutton, about a potential raise, but this didn't work out, and he ended up deciding that this would be his final season. So Death of the Daleks is a fine serial. We have the Daleks in a serial which would have been better without them, but we also have a Nation script which isn't just a reuse of his previous ideas, with it bringing some new stuff to the table. It does have its problems, mostly concerning very basic characters, with even Sarah being nothing in the grand scheme of things, but it's better than his previous serial, and perhaps the best of the Pertwee era Dalek stories, although that's not really a high bar at all. But next time, the Doctor decides to return to Peladon to visit King Peladon, but instead finds the planet facing problems with miners refusing to work after deaths caused by Agador, and the trouble seems to run deeper than before. Next time, the monster of Peladon.